This is a moldy piece of pork. And we're gonna deep fry this.
Okay, that's scary. Nope. Oh god, no.
To make the best tonkatsu I've ever had.
Japan has mind-blowing pork. Farmers will meticulously select breeds and feed pigs specific foods. They want each pig to live a happy, stress-free life, so they can have unique, high-quality flavor.
But at home, we don't have much of a choice. So we gotta make normal pork taste amazing using dry aging is a technique used to concentrate and enhance the flavors of meat.
Dry aging pork is not a thing because there's too much water inside of the meat that causes it to spoil. But there is a mold that simulates 90 days of dry aging in a day and a half. And I did that in my last video with a piece of steak, so check that out if you want. I talk about more of the science. This time I'm gonna try it with a piece of pork. Except there is a problem. Parasites. The bacteria on beef actually come from the hide or the digestive tract when handling and breaking down each cut. So a quick sear gets rid of it. Or in our case, growing mold on the surface of the meat prevented harmful bacteria from growing. But in pork, we literally have something living in the meat, and if it's eaten, it can cause you to spill your insides out from both holes and have you shivering in your bed, writhing in stomach pain.
Well, time to test it out.
I'm salting the pork and letting it sit for 20 minutes until it weeps. Then we're covering with cornstarch mixed with mold spores. And we're incubating for 36 hours at 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. While the mold is growing, now we gotta prep our tonkatsu. I've been lucky enough to eat and also learn the secrets from the best tonkatsu restaurants in Japan. Tonkatsu is essentially a piece of pork that is covered in flour, then egg and panko, and fried until it's crispy on the outside. All the recipes in English has made bento-style tonkatsu, but in Japan there's so many levels above that. And this restaurant used techniques that really made me question everything that I know about cooking. Their attention to detail over the smallest things resulted in the best tonkatsu experience I've ever had.
One of their secrets is in the crust.
Panko are breadcrumbs made from shokupan. In America, we do have access to panko, but in Japan, there are actually two types. Dry, which is what we have, and fresh. The fresh panko is larger and has a higher moisture content, which is something extremely important that I'll talk about in a bit.
I just wanted to read this research article on the science of breadcrumbs.
The force that is required for subsequent fractures will depend on the composition of material and size of previous fractures. This jagged behavior is particularly prominent of large breadcrumb coating.
In other words, big breadcrumb, big crunch. Wow, science is silly.
But even if you decide to buy a fresh batch of shokupan and blend it to make your own, there's a problem.
They turn dark brown almost immediately after you fry it.
Tonkatsu Narikura has a special made breadcrumb with very little sugar to prevent it from browning as much. They want to keep the focus on the flavors of the pork rather than distract it with the taste of the crust.
So that means
we have to make something called a yudane by adding boiling water to bread flour together and letting it sit overnight. This gelatinizes the starch to make a more tender bread.
So if you don't want to make your own bread just to make breadcrumbs, I'll let you know a workaround later.
I'm adding milk, yeast, butter, and torn yudane into the mixture. Then flour and salt. We're mixing until we can stretch the dough paper thin and it doesn't tear. This is also known as the window pane test. Then we let it rise until it doubles in size. Afterwards, we're punching it down and splitting it into two. We're flattening it and folding it into thirds and rolling it up. Then we're gonna oil a bread tin and let it rise again until it reaches the level of it. When it's done rising, it goes straight into the oven at 365 or 185 Celsius for 25 to 30 minutes. After we pull it out, we gotta let it cool.
Then we're going to slice off the brown bits.
Time to shred. These breadcrumbs are not as long and they're kind of uneven shaped compared to what you would normally get in Japan.
I'm also separating the big shards from the little shards in order to get a more uniform shape to see what works.
Hopefully one of them will turn out good. I don't really know. There's another trick that Narikura uses that imparts an incredible amount of flavor without using any seasoning. It's right here. This.
The choice of oil is actually quite crucial for when we fry this piece of meat. There are two types of oils, unsaturated, like vegetable oil or olive oil, and saturated, which are solid at room temperature, like butter or lard.
Tonkatsu Narikura uses animal fats, but they use the most coveted form.
Subcutaneous fat, which is fat found underneath the skin, is what most lard comes from.
The other type of fat has a subtler taste of pork and is oily at room temperatures, making it perfect to fry tonkatsu.
Which comes from visceral fat that surrounds and protects the organ.
Also known as leaf lard, which is what Narikura uses.
So after calling butcher after butcher and reaching out to every farm in my area,
I was only able to get normal lard. And that's okay, because Narikura uses lard in a way that I never would have.
frying at high temperatures above 300 Fahrenheit or 150 Celsius will give you a crispy crust and less oily product.
But at Narikura, they do the opposite.
Low temperature frying. Normally if you fry something at high temperature, you see bubbles immediately, which is a sign that water is escaping from your food, creating a barrier preventing oil to come in. But if your oil is not hot enough,
your final product will just end up being oily, right?
I'm using a regular piece of pork so I don't waste my moldy ones. I'm gonna season with salt.
And let the meat come up close to room temperature.
We're gonna cover it in flour and vigorously pat off the excess, otherwise the panko won't stick properly.
We're going to beat some eggs until it's silky smooth.
Then we're gonna drop it in an egg wash and gently press on the panko. Then it goes into some rendered pork lard
At 260 degrees Fahrenheit or 127 degrees Celsius. After 3 minutes, while the crust is set, we're flipping it over one time.
and then it's gonna cook until the internal temperature is around
140 Fahrenheit or 60 Celsius.
and we're gonna let it rest for 5 minutes to let it carry overcook.
Making sure that it's laying vertically so that there is no pool of oil on top of the meat.
Yeah, like this does not look good. There's a bunch of like splotchy parts on it where it's kind of like naked. Yeah, all of it just kind of falls off of the meat and it doesn't stay on too well. And overall it just tastes kind of porky, not super pleasant. I don't know what to do. Shit. You know, I had this all scripted out thinking everything would work out and then I'd get to explain the science of how it worked. But this is kind of awkward now.
The water content in the fresh panko, along with a thick cut of pork, helps form a steam barrier against the oil, slowing the oil absorption. On top of that, the low temperature actually gently cooks the pork, so it minimizes moisture loss and leads to a juicier end product.
So what I probably did wrong was uneven panko, causing it to flake off and not protect the pork properly. Also rendered out the lard the day before and left some pork bits in it, so it had some weird, strong, porky flavors. So I made 2 more loaves of bread, and I think I figured out how to make larger, more even-sized panko. So this time, I'm gonna cut up the bread into small pieces and then process them in small batches, so they can be even all around and be the exact size that I want. So if you don't want to bake your own bread just to make breadcrumbs, which is totally understandable, I would use a bread with like low sugar or no dough conditioners like oil or butter. So something like a French baguette, or if you want to get really crazy with it, maybe sourdough bread. That would make a huge difference to your tonkatsu. All right, it's time to check on the moldy pork. This is crazy. Every time I do this, it always looks so insane. Doesn't smell bad, which I'm glad. Smells a little bit like laundry. So let's get to frying.
I usually plan everything out and try to think of every possible outcome, mostly because I'm afraid of making mistakes. But I realize when you're at the edge of your ability, sometimes you're gonna fall short. Instead of fearing those moments, mistakes and failures are proof that you're pushing your limits. After all, how are you gonna grow if you never challenge yourself to see what's possible?
Finally, time to try it. Holy crap! Huh, that actually doesn't need the sauce. That is so umami. This funk actually enhances the pork. Like it adds something more to the pork. Pork doesn't really have like a super strong taste to start with. So it's not covering up something like a beefy flavor. So it's kind of like, I can like it because it's not really taking away from a flavor that I already enjoy. Because usually to me, pork is kind of like flavorless and bland. If I don't have pork like this, I don't want it. But yeah, I'm really happy with the crust. After like 10 minutes, it's still really, really crispy. Like here, let me just pull this mic down. I'm not gonna lie to you, the crust didn't all stay on. Okay, I know somebody's gonna be like, Oh, you need to fry it with the mold crust on it. All right, I'm on it. And keep all of the crust on. I see that. Backside's kind of naked. The egg. Okay, that's good. Nope. Oh god, no. Oh, fuck. Okay, I'm actually kind of salty that the crust on this one looks a lot better than the crust that I peeled off and scraped. So, cheers. That one was way better. Yeah, that was, frying with the crust is way better. Yeah, well, have a good day. Subscribe to see if I survive. See ya.